adverse drug events, which sounds like just a great time.
It really does.
Okay.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
To sort of get us started, it probably helps to talk about some of the terminology that's, seen in regulatory settings or in research or, even in your pharmacy. So in general, the overarching category that we're talking about is adverse drug events. That is the unfavorable or unintended response to a drug, whether or not causality is implied. These can be thought of basically, again, as the broadest classification or definition of things that include adverse drug reactions and medication errors, for example.
So side effects. We're talking about side effects.
Essentially. So again, what we'll get to, side effects or adverse drug reactions fall under that category of adverse drug events.
Okay.
So there are, it's not the only reason. You might be wondering, why do we even care about those classifications? It's just that, when reporting, when trying to classify these, when trying to understand what to do about them on a micro level, or as far as, the FDA potentially putting out a, safety warning or something for the public, it just helps understand what bucket these sort of fall in. And
Sure.
So to your point, mostly everybody knows these as side effects. Side effects, just to reiterate, fall under this overarching umbrella of adverse drug events.
Okay. So an adverse drug event is the big category. And then within that, there's adverse drug reactions and side effects and some other things as well. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. And so ADRs, we can call them ADEs, but specifically ADRs, adverse drug reactions, these again can be thought of as your common side effects.
Okay.
So from the WHO, these are basically, from their definition, a response which is noxious and unintended, and which occurs at doses normally used in humans for prophylaxis, diagnosis, or therapy of disease, or for the modification of physiological function. So, fancy way of saying, we generally think that it's the drug that's leading to whatever is being experienced negatively.
A causal relationship. We think we're pretty sure it's a 1-to-1.
Definitely.
Okay. How do these occur? What is going on? Why is it that when I take a medicine for one thing, all of a sudden I'm having an issue with something else?
Mm-hmm. So the key point here is that even though it seems like what we're talking about is a very 1-to-1 relationship, there are certainly outside contributors that make these events or these reactions more or less likely to happen.
Okay.
So oftentimes it's related to the dosage of the medication that's used. And that doesn't necessarily mean the medication was overdosed. It just means that individual had a heightened sensitivity, which is another contributor here. But yes, it's related to the dosage. It can be related to the individual patient sensitivity. It can be attributed to certain medication combinations. So those that are used together are more or less likely to, have an event or reaction manifest itself. Allergic reactions even fall into this category as well. And so those are a little more, I think, easily understandable or easily recognizable.
Right.
You take an antibiotic and you end up with hives or a rash, and very classic presentation of an allergic reaction. And then finally would be those that might be, which we won't really talk about. It's a little bit more of a loose end. These are the reactions that might be genetically predetermined.
Oh.
So there might be a way that an individual metabolizes certain genes that code for different metabolic pathways that might be different from one individual to another. And so I think over time, what you'll see with, pharmacogenomics and that sort of umbrella category is that dosing regimens, medication selection, all of those things, we might be able to make better decisions for people understanding what sort of genetic hand, based upon their genetic hand.
But
so that's a
future tech.
Sure. And it's one of those things that's always happening. it's always in the works. And there are certain things you can be tested for now.
Yeah.
But again, I didn't want to get lost on that, but it just shows you how many it's not just like this drug does this thing to every person and you have to watch out. It's just that you're not always playing on level ground.
Okay. So let me make sure I got, you said dosage, the genetics, you said, sensitivity, patient sensitivity, and combinations, like weird combinations of drugs. And then what was the last one? Allergic reactions. Okay. Those are the primary contributors to these adverse drug events, or
these are
reactions?
Technically reactions.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. How serious do these get? My understanding is some of them are pretty serious.
Definitely. And they are quite wide ranging. And I think that the meat of this discussion, will shed further light on how wide ranging they can be, but they can be as, sort of innocuous as, it made my stomach hurt, or, I had this cough since I started taking this medication. And then all they had to do was switch you to another drug in a different class that does kind of the same thing. And then no harm, no foul, you move on from it. To all the way to now we can look at more or less the regulatory perspective of how serious these can be. And the FDA, what they consider serious outcomes are those that can lead to death, unfortunately, those that are life-threatening or pretty close to that point, hospitalizations, whether that's just a brief stint or something that requires long-term hospitalization, disability, congenital anomaly or birth defects, those that required intervention to basically prevent permanent impairment or damage. And then there's sort of this other serious category that is a catch-all for the things that don't fit those first 4 or 5. So,
okay.
And so that's how, those are listed right on the FDA website. And those are things that as a manufacturer or as a certain facility or certain healthcare center, when you see those sorts of things pop up, those are the ones they want you to obviously report very, efficient,
really
time,
pay attention
in a time
to.
sensitive way.
Okay. Yeah. All right.